Welcome everybody to our Facebook Live today. Today I am going to be going over some fun sewing projects to spruce up your picnic table. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I'm a PFAFF educator and I live in chilly New England, so we're not in summertime yet here. In fact, in May we could have freezing weather and 90-degree weather all in the same week, which I think is what we're having this week. Kind of unpredictable, but by June it should be nice and warm. So in thinking about this class topic, I came up with a few projects that I wanted to share with you and some tips on how to do them more easily and well. So the first thing I did is I went and I bought a new tablecloth, one that's water resistant. And just to sort of start the game off, like what colors did I want to use? And I wanted something bright and bold. So this, just bear in mind, this is my tablecloth. Of course, I did not make it. However, the rest of the stuff I did. So I decided that I would first off make some napkins. And I decided to use batik fabric because with batik fabric, you will not have a wrong side and a right side. So whichever way you fold it, it looks good. And I also decided to go to my serger to make a rolled edge. Now you could certainly make a nice edge on your sewing machine. However, I really like the rolled edge. It's more substantial, I think, for a napkin, and it's super fast and super easy. Maybe I can get a close-up kind of. Let's change cameras. Might be better on here where you can see a close-up better of the, okay, now where did my camera go on here? Okay, we just winked out here. Don't know why. Let me check my connections. Oh, I know why. I pushed the wrong button. That's always what does it. Fade to black. We don't want to fade to black yet. So here is the rolled edge, and what I used was 12 weight thread. So I've got a pretty substantial rolled edge on this napkin. That's just the way that I like it. So it's 4 spools of thread that are all 12 weight. And I'm going to switch back to my serger here. So what I have here is the Admire Air 7000, our computerized air threading serger that I absolutely love. And one of the things that I love about it is the fact that it's air threading, of course. Once you have an air threader, you never want to go back. But I also love that it's all computerized and it has this very clear interface here. So I've got tons of stitches in here, I think maybe 24, something like that. And I just go down the list and find the stitch that I want. I want the 3-thread rolled edge. Shows me which needle I should have and all the other settings, as well as how to thread it. And then also how to set up the cutter and so on. And also what sort of fabrics it's good for. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to show you kind of the fast and easy way to do a rolled edge napkin. And then I'm going to show you a little bit more of a refined way to do it. So I'm just going to put this is obviously not, this is not napkin size. I'm just making it a little bit smaller so I can get that rolled edge really fast to demo for you. So I'm just going to put my fabric in there, and I'm going to want it to cut off a bit on the sides. So I make sure that I've got everything butted up to the, a little bit beyond the cutter so I get a nice rolled edge. And it is pretty thick because I've got 12 weight thread in the needle and in both the loopers. And so this is the simple way to do it, where you just basically chain off. I need to move my camera down a little bit, I think, so you can see better and focus it. It's right in front of me, and so I might have bumped it just now. Apologize. So I've got this one rolled edge, and the simple way would be just to lift up the foot, put this one in, and then do another rolled edge. Now you're going to have these tags or these tails on the end, and the quick way to get rid of them is to, when I do another row on this side, and I'm doing this quickly, so of course I didn't do a very good edge here. But if I had done a good edge, this would have been right across here. And I could just trim that and put a little dot of fray check. Or the more substantial way to end these tails is to pick this out, unchain it, and then take a needle and bring the threads into your rolled edge. That is more work than I'd want to do for picnic napkins. So I'm going to show you a different method, which is the method that I generally use. So the way that I do it is I'm going to serge along one edge, get the rolled edge, and then I'm going to take the next 3 corners, and I'll show you how you can do that. So because I have 12-weight thread in here, it is I do need to give it a little bit of a push to get it going so it doesn't get hung up getting off of the stitch finger there. So I'm going to go a little bit slower so I get better results. Now, when I come down to this edge, what I want to do is I'm actually going to cut a slit in here about 2 inches. Like this on the very end. And I'm going to do the rolled edge right up to the edge of my fabric. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my foot up. I'm going to create some slack in the needle thread by pulling on it a little bit. And I need to get my stitches off the stitch finger back here, or I won't be able to turn the corner. So I'm just going to pull back a little bit and then turn. Then I'm going to get the end of my first rolled edge right under the needle, my cut edge of my fabric against the cutter, and then I need to tighten my needle thread back up so that it's not too loosey-goosey. Put my foot down. And then when I start to serge again, I'm going to have to push a little bit here to get started. Just give it a little bit of help. And I'm going to hold on to this, make sure it gets started in a good way. And then I'll come back down here. And before I get too far, I'm going to cut a couple inches off here. I'm not cut a couple inches off. I'm going to cut in a couple inches. And I'm going to sew all the way to the end of my fabric. Then I'll put my foot up. I'm going to create some slack in the needle thread. I'm going to pull my fabric back so it pulls the stitches off of the stitch finger. And then I'm going to turn this around and get my fabric lined up so the needle's going to go right where I want to in the beginning of this edge. And my thread's gotten a little bit tangled here. I'm going to tauten up my thread, put my foot down, grab a hold of this tail, and give it a little bit of a push as I start down this side. And then I'll do one more here. I went down a little too far. Actually, when I'm doing this, I usually cut these in advance before I even start serging. A little awkward once it's under the needle. Okay, so I'm going to keep sewing till the very edge of the fabric. And I cut it in a bad way, so I'm just going to show you what these edges look like, because I kind of cut the fabric not very well, and it's not going to sew very well there. So I'm going to show you what you're going to end up with. So coming back over to this close-up, you will end up with a nice turned corner, And what you'll do is when you, and this one as well, whoops, I'm off camera. So I've got a nice turned corner there and a nice turned corner here. And what I'll end up, if I had gone all the way around, I would have one tail, which I could unchain and stick it back in with a needle, or I could just cut it and put a little bit of fray check on there after I've serged along this, this edge here. I'm still not on camera here, sorry. So if I had serged all the way, all four sides, then I would have one tail here, and I could unchain this and thread the threads through there, or I can just trim this and put some fray check on there. But I will have had 3 corners that were done just by turning the corner. So I like that method. That's the method that I use to make rolled edge napkins on the serger. So now we're going to switch gears and we are going to do a different project. So we got our napkins. Now, when we have a picnic, many times people use paper plates. And paper plates are maybe not so politically correct anymore to use a lot. But you could also use, we have these metal plates that are camping plates. And the paper plates need a little help because they can be a little flimsy, particularly when you have hot food on them. And these can be a little difficult to handle because they get hot. So I'm going to show you how to use rope to make a nice, pretty place to put your paper plates. What would we call this? I'm not quite sure. But it gives support to the paper plate, and it will also keep your metal plates from getting too hot and not being able to grip them. So these are super easy to make. And I am going to tell you that Karen Charles is going to do a whole class on making rope bowls and making rope rugs, I believe. That's coming up very soon, and hopefully someone from my team will put the dates in the comment section so that you'll know when to tune in to see Karen do her full class on rope bowls and rope rugs, because she's super creative and she's made a lot of rope items. And I'm sure it's going to be a fun class. But I'm going to show you how to make this. It's super fast. And it's just using cotton rope that you can get at the hardware store. And I also used the same 12-weight thread so that it gave it this nice, it's variegated, so it gave it this very nice colorful effect. And then I'm going to show you how to use the circular attachment to put a little decoration in the middle. So I'm going to grab some rope. So it's just your basic rope. You can, I've used this same rope and dyed it. You can wrap it with fabric. There's all sorts of things that you can do with it. And there are different methods of working with the rope. I like to take the very first piece and kind of cut it on an angle. I'll show you what I mean. You know, it's all frayed here. I like to cut it on an angle so it's got a little bit of a sharper point on it. And some people will put tape around the end. They find that that makes it easier to work with and so that it doesn't unravel on you. Then you're going to take this and you're going to roll it around to 2 or 3 times to get it started, and then stick a pin or 2 in it, and I'll show you what it looks like once I get it rolled. None of this is difficult. I'd say getting it started is probably the most difficult part, and that's not very difficult. So you're going to end up with something that looks like that. And basically we're going to have a zigzag stitch that's going to stitch in between all of these, all the gaps between the rope. So I'm going to show you how I would set up my zigzag stitch. So let's see if this is going to work here. So right now I'm on my icon 2, And I'm going to go into sewing. And then I'm going to choose 1.1.6, the zigzag stitch. And I want to change the width and the length. So I'm going to go down to edit stitch. And different people use different settings. I tend to do about a 4.5 and a 4.5, but everybody has their own personal preference. Now, with the advent of the Icon 2, we have this new feature that I absolutely love, and that's projection. I'm not going to use that for this task. That's under this icon, but a little bit later I'm going to show you that. So I've got my zigzag stitch set up. And now we'll talk about feet. Some people just use the OA foot. I like to see the gap between the individual pieces of rope because I want to go right over that gap. So I like to have an open toe foot. Now, some people may prefer, I'm pulling out another foot that a lot of people like. That's the sewing star foot. The sewing star foot is a lot like a 1A foot that's been cut, or it's like an open toe with this extra support here. So this is a very versatile foot. This would definitely work, but some people just use the OA or the 1A foot. I like the open toe. I like the open toe for a lot of things. I will use it for applique. What I do with applique is I move my needle all the way over to this side so that I can then use the inner edge of this toe sticking out on the edge of my applique, and it just helps me to keep everything where I want it to be. So I like the open toe foot for that. I also like it for stitch in the ditch. I don't tend to use a stitch in the ditch foot when I'm ditching because I don't feel like I can see the ditch. I use the open toe foot, but a lot of people love the stitch in the ditch foot. So now I need to get this started. So what I'm going to do is once I get going, I want this line to be right over the gap between each piece of rope. So the red line should stay here. Whoops, get this a little bit further over here. I want my red line to stay there. And it's a little bit more challenging when you first get started, and then it gets easier and easier. So I'm going to stick this in here, put my needle down, and now I'm going to take my pin out so I don't hit it with the needle. And actually just start stitching here. And then you just keep turning it. And like I said, it's a little more challenging in the beginning. So you're going to go slower. Now, if I were using a beige, off-white thread, it wouldn't show up as much, but I like the contrast that the 12-weight variegated thread provides. Let me get rid of this tail. It's going to bug me. So I'm trying to keep the red middle line on the foot in that gap. Now it's a little more challenging in the very beginning. And then as it gets bigger and bigger, it is easier to do that. You see, I'm starting to pick up some speed here. But take your time. Once you have enough on the left side that you can get a better grip on it, then you can really start to go a little bit faster. So if somebody asks what size rope this is, I'm pretty sure it is 1/4 inch. It's basic clothesline rope. It's nothing fancy. I think I got it at my local hardware store. And to make this size of bowl for the to place a paper plate on, that took 12 yards. So I'm not going to do this big enough to put a paper plate on it because I think that you've got the idea for the flat part. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to show you how to make it curved on the edges. Trying to keep my fingers out of the sewing field, but it's pretty difficult with all the cameras around and keeping my fingers where I'm not used to placing them. Okay, so say this was the width of a paper plate flat area. So let me show you what I mean. So what I did is I measured from here to here. Well, actually down through the middle. So I would get the circumference, right? No, the diameter. And because once I get to this part, I want to have the bowl start to slope up a bit. So once I get a disc that is this size, then I'm going to start to slope the sides up. So the way that I do that, let's see if I can move this slightly, it would be better. Okay. So as I'm working with this, if I want to start to have the sides slope up, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this. I've got too much cord here going on. Let's change this like that. That's better. I was wondering why it didn't feel right. Let me do just a little bit more here. This is the way I usually do it. Like I said, working around the cameras, you sometimes get into these odd positions. Okay, so when I want it to start to curve up, I pick the disc up, and as I'm going around, after a few revolutions, it is going to start to curve up. I got to untangle my rope a bit. Usually I wind the rope into a ball like yarn and put it into a bowl, and that helps it to unwind as I'm sewing. Now, I don't want this to actually become a bowl, so I'm not going to do this very long, or the sides will go up too high. I want it just to have a gentle curve. So it looks like it is, I've got a curve here. So now I'm going to start doing it flat again, because I just want it to curve a little bit on the edges. I don't want a bowl. So I'm just keeping this area right here flat. It's not curved up. I'll do a couple more rows, then I'll show you what I have this disc that would be good for a teeny tiny paper plate. Okay, there we go. So now I've got my teeny tiny paper plate disc. And what I would do at this point to have the same sort of edge that I did on the sample, the big one, is I would cut this again on an angle. Oops, I'm going to cut it on an angle. See if I can get this in the camera. Trying to cut it on the diagonal. Then I'm going to scooch this in here and curl this over. And then I'm going to sew down the tip where I cut it. And you can leave that loop as big or as loose or as tight as you want. I'm going to just reverse a little bit and show it to you. Something did not completely cut. This 12-weight thread is a bit challenging sometimes. Okay, so I could leave the loop like this, or I could go back and sew it down so it's a little bit, it sticks out a little bit less. But this is how you can make a, you know, if you just kept going around and around, you can have something to put a paper plate or a metal plate on. And of course, you would do this flat part a lot bigger in order to fit a plate before you started bringing the sides up. Now, to do a applique with the circular attachment, what I would do is, first of all, show you what a circular attachment is. So this is a circular attachment, and this is especially good for those of you that do not have an embroidery machine. I could use the embroidery function to make an applique on my rope plate, but I wanted to show the circular attachment because I've seen a lot of people that have done things with applique, but I haven't seen anybody doing anything with the circular attachment. So I just want to remind everybody this tool is a really handy tool, and especially if you don't have an embroidery machine. Now, the way this works is there are these right angle brackets here, and those go right into these holes on your stitch plate, and they fit in just like that. Then you has a slider, and depending on how big you want your circle to be, you move it out to make it bigger, in to make it smaller. And there are inches and millimeters on the side here. So what I would do is get a piece of fabric. I'm just going to eyeball this. If I wanted it to be an exact size, I would go put the slider in an exact position that I wanted. But I'm going to put my fabric in the middle. And what I want to do is I want to take my fabric, put that in the middle, and put this push pin right in the very center of my rope disc so that my circle will be centered, because this push pin will be the center of your circle that's created, circle applique. So I'm going to put my push pin into my fabric and the center of my rope disc, like so. Then I'm going to put that push pin into the slider. Oh, I just pulled it out. Let's go back in. Okay, so I've got it into the center of my bowl. And with the slider in that position, the first thing I would do is kind of audition this circle to make sure that I'm not going to run out of fabric. Looks like it was really close, but it looks like I'm also going to have enough. Yep, just enough. So now I'm going to switch to a straight stitch. And then I'm going to stitch down this orange fabric to make an applique. Oh, my needle just came unthreaded. So now you get to see one of my favorite features of the Icon 2 is the automatic needle threader. Just push the button. Oh, sometimes the 12-weight thread, if the needle is too small, is a little bit... Oh, I know what's going on. I'll tell you what the problem is. When you have the push pin right in the way of the automatic needle threader, it is not going to allow you to use the automatic needle threader because it hits the push pin. So let's move that out of the way, and then I can actually demo the automatic needle threader. If I get the thread where it's supposed to be. That's what's supposed to happen when it doesn't hit the push pin. Okay, so let's bring this back and just make sure that our position is such that we will have fabric for our entire circle. Yes. So now I'm going to start stitching. And the feed dogs will move the rope disc in a circle so that you get this nice circle right in the middle. Now this might want to pop up on you because there's the rope disc is so thick. So just every so often get a bit of push. Now we have our circle. So the other thing you should know about the automatic needle threader, or about the circular attachment, is that you should not use the scissors function when you have the circular attachment in place, because it will, the metal that holds it in place will over time dull the cutter if you keep using the cutter. So you want to use the old school way and just bring your foot up and cut it with your scissors. What I do if I'm doing a lot of work with my circular attachment, I put a piece of painter's tape over the icon, or over the button. See if I can get this to come up, over the button for my cutter. So that I put painter's tape there, because otherwise I will automatically hit that button as soon as I'm done sewing. It's just automatic without thought. So I'm going to cut this. Now I'm going to take this out and I'm going to trim very close to that edge that we just stitched down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this very quickly because you're all waiting to see what the result is. And what you want to do is you want to cut as close as you can to the stitching without cutting the stitching. Then I'm going to finish this off with a decorative stitch, putting it back into the circular attachment. And remember, I have the 12-weight variegated thread in place, which I think really adds something to these projects. I'm not really crazy about variegated thread, but I really like it with these rope bowls. It just seems to add depth or something. Interest for sure. Okay, so now I'm going to take my push pin and I'm going to put it right in the hole that I previously had it in, and then stick it back in my slider without moving the slider from where it was, so that if I were to start stitching, I'd be on my old stitch line. Now I'm going to go in and pick a satin stitch. And make it the width I want. That's pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to start stitching here. Okay, now I've finished, but I don't want to hit my cutter, so I'm going to bring my foot up, and then I'll cut this and show you, bring it up close to the camera, and you'll see how nice the variegated 12-weight thread looks on this project. At least I think so. See if I can get it on the camera the right way. So isn't that nice? So even if you don't have an embroidery machine, you can add, I could have used decorative stitches in here. You know, I chose to do the applique, but there's all sorts of things that you would do. So just to review, the first step, what I would do is, if I weren't using a standard paper plate, I would measure, the next one I make, I would measure that flat area. Then I would do a disc the size of the flat area on the paper plate. Then I would start to bring the sides up. And for a standard paper plate, it takes about 12 yards of rope. So if you have a bigger plate, like these are actually bigger, I would probably want to make it maybe a little bit bigger. It does work the same size. Show you, this is the stand for a standard paper plate, how it would fit with the metal plate that's fairly typical with for camping. So that's project number 2. Now, project number 3, I got to grab where I tucked it. The best laid plans. I had everything laid out here. And now as I'm talking, I've put something back and can't find it. Oh, here it is. Okay. So now I'm going to show you how you could create on the Icon 2 itself this design. And then I'm going to show you some tips on how to get a really nice top stitch, because I decided to do this in vinyl because with picnicking, I thought it would be easier to clean off. It would be more, not robust, but more kind of rugged for being outside and stain resistant. And so I created the embroidered it. Then I put a backing on it so it looks nice and finished, and then finished it with some top stitching. And it looks like we have a question here. So, will the circle attachment work with the Creative Vision? Yes, it will. It will work with many, many, many of our machines. And if other people have machines that they're wondering about, you can go into the PFAFF.com site and find the link for accessories. And you can look up the circular attachment and it will tell you what machines it is good for. Typically, what you'll see, let's see if I can find it here. On all of our attachments and feet, you see something up here, and it's out of focus, but what it is it says B, C, D, E, F, G, J. It has a bunch of alphabet letters there. Each of those letters stands for a certain type of PFAFF machine, a class of machines. So the Vision is a certain class. You can look that up on in the accessory guide on page 5 if you have the accessory guide, or you can download it on the PFAFF.com site. And once you know what class your machine is, you always look for that class on anything you buy. So say you have a G class machine, you always want to have a G on the accessory you buy or the foot you buy, and then you'll know that it's all good, it's going to work. And that accessory guide is really good to download because it not only tells you if it's compatible, also shows you a picture of it and shows you how to use it. So it's a really good thing. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make this design. And my camera needs to be changed a little bit. Let's see what we got going on here. Just bear with me a minute. Get my camera set up the way ideally it should be, so you can see well. Of course, I had it set up, but it has frozen. So let's unfreeze it. Well, we're going to go back to our iPhone camera because the other two are malfunctioning. Okay, the ones that are supposed to be really good for video, not working so well. Okay, so here we have the Icon 2 screen. And this is the home screen. If I'm going to embroider, I go to embroidery. And within the Icon 2, there actually is design software. Like I am going to start out by creating the appliques on the side of this placemat. So I decided I would do just 2 long squares to kind of play off the long color bands on my tablecloth that I purchased. So I'm going to go back here and show you how I made that. So if you want to make applique, down at the very, once you're in embroidery, down at the very bottom, there's an icon that says Applique Creator. And you touch that. Then once you're in Applique Creator, over here there's an icon that is a star and a circle. That's where your shapes are. So I'm going to touch that. And we have all these crazy dingbats. We could choose pre-made shapes or these basic shapes. I'm going to choose a square. Then I'm going to close this window. Now I have a square, and I'm going to go into Applique, edit Applique down here because I want to make it into a rectangle. Now, right now, if I go to the scale button and I try to make this smaller, it's going to maintain it as a square, and I want it to be a rectangle. So I need to unlock it by touching this lock. Now I can make it into a rectangle. And I can bring it up to the top, maybe make it a little bit longer. I touch the end and drag it, and I can make it a little bit bigger. Now, if I wanted to change it in small increments, I could use these arrows. So I'm going to make it a little bit wider. And now I want to move it to the left a little bit. And I can go into this icon if I want to use a different satin stitch. Like what I used on my project was this one. So once I made one, then I just went in and touched the, I finished with the edit applique, and then I clicked on OK. And now I want to duplicate that. So I'm going to go into Edit Design down here. And this button is the duplicate button. It looks like a piece of paper on top of another one. So now I have two. So I'm just going to move one down. And now I have those two bands of applique right next to each other on the end. And the way this will stitch out, what I just created is an applique. And what that means is when this stitches out, the first thing it will do after you press start is it will stitch a straight stitch rectangle, and then it stops so that you can place your fabric down that you want to applique. Then you hit the start button, and it will stitch that piece of fabric down, your applique fabric, in a double stitch. Then it will stop for you to cut around there. Then you hit start, and it will do the satin stitch to finish it off. So it looks like Meredith wants to comment something. Did you want to, you said you wanted it in the comment field that says you want to add some comments. Not quite sure. Meredith is one of our helpers for Facebook Lives, and I'm not quite sure what she's trying to tell me in the comment field. So you need to clarify, Meredith, and I'm going to keep going until you put more in there because I don't know what you want. Okay, so we've got two appliques done, and then I'm going to show you how to do the font on a curve that I did with the sun on the inside. So now what we do is I would, first of all, check and make sure I'm in a big hoop. So I need to go down to hoop options. And I am not in the biggest hoop. I want to be in the 360 by 260. So that'll give us more room for designing. So what I should have done was check my hoop first, and then I would have made these longer. But to save time, I'm going to leave them the way they are. I am going to move them up so they're out of the way. So let's move these up, at least one of them. Move this one up above so it's not taking up our font room. That looks good. Now, when I want to add a font, I'm going to close Edit Design. I'm going to go into the A icon for where our fonts reside. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose Curls 30. Then I type in what I want to say on my table, my placemat. Okay, so Meredith has elaborated. Oh, she's telling me that she added a link to the accessory catalog in the comments field that references the circular attachment in case you are interested in it. Like I said, I think it's a great thing to have. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and I know I've done Facebook Lives on it before. Okay, so what I had placed on the table, on the placemat, was Happy Summer. So I'm going to type in happy. And I don't want it to be happy just straight across. I want it to be on a curve. So I'm going to touch this icon. And now I want it to curve up. This is a more acute or more rounded upward curve than this one. I think I want the more rounded one, so I'm going to touch that. Then this will help you to separate the letters if you feel they're too close together. So I'm going to close my font menu by touching the icon. And I do want these to be a little further apart. So I'm going to touch this icon and touch the plus until it looks the way that I want it to look. And that looks pretty good to me. When I'm happy with it, I touch the typewriter icon. And what I do want to do, though, is I want it to run this way. So I'm going to go into Edit Design. And then I'm going to touch this icon, which will rotate that. And if I touch it in the middle, it'll rotate at 90 degrees. So that's what I want. But I want it to be more over about there. Then I'm going to deselect it by touching outside of the box. Go back into my font menu, touch curls again. And this time I'm going to put summer exclamation mark. And I want it to be on a curve, but this time instead of up, it's going to be the reverse. And I am going to want to change the distance apart. And it looks a little funny now because I still have to rotate this 90 degrees, but I'm just going to first separate my letters of summer and then close the font menu by touching the typewriter. Then I want to rotate that, so I'm going to touch the rotate button and then rotate it 90 degrees and then bring that down here. Now I wanted to go into the I wanted to find a sun to put in the middle for summer. And so on the icon too, if you have a subscription to the My Sewnet embroidery design library, you can view the designs right on your machine. So on the icon too. So that is this icon here that's a flower and a globe. So I touch that to open it up and I can search on sun and click the search button. And it will go out and it will find a whole bunch of different suns. And let's see. Oh, here's the one that I chose right here. So I can just choose it like that and close the window. And now I have my design to stitch out. So when you have a subscription to the embroidery library, you have over 8,000 designs that you can use 24/7 whenever you want. Just search on what you want and put it in your design and you're good to go. So there's the design. And then what I did to stitch it out is, this is a little smaller piece, but it's the same concept, a little smaller hoop. I used tearaway and I floated my vinyl on top. Now, I don't always do vinyl this way or leather this way. My preference actually is to use the metal hoop with the magnets that hold everything in place, because then I don't need to float it. And it doesn't affect the vinyl or leather. So these hoops are really great for things like that, where you're going to embroider on vinyl or leather, and you know that it's not going to shift on you because these magnets hold it in place really tightly. It's also really good for very delicate fabrics that you don't want to hoop, like tulle or velvet, organza, something like that. So I absolutely love my metal hoop. So once I stitched it out, then what I did is I took my vinyl and my backing, I put them right sides together, and I just went all the way around and left a gap about that big on one side, and then I turned right sides out. Now, what I wanted to show you next is the next step, because if you don't do any top stitching, it has like this almost like pillowy effect. It just doesn't look as good as when you do the top stitching. Maybe I can put it on this other camera and you can see it, the difference better. So this is the top stitched version. You know, it's nice and flat, looks good. Then this one that has not been top stitched, you see how it's just kind of pillowy and it just doesn't look as good. Now there's a couple of tricks to get this to look nice, because at this point you do not want to mess up because you put a lot of time and effort into this. So the first thing I would do is I would turn right sides out, and then I'm going to press down all of these edges on this side, because if you touch the hot iron to the vinyl, it's going to melt and you're going to be very sad. So you want it, but you do want to press this side carefully to basically put as much of a fold into the vinyl as you can. Then what I would do is take some clover clips, turn under this is the side where I left the gap. You will turn under the cotton fabric and turn under the vinyl and put some clover clips there to hold it where you want it to be, so that when you top stitch, you're closing off that hole. Now, I'm going to get rid of my design and go into sewing here. So just bear with me a minute. Now, the foot that I would use, there's a few different feet that I would consider, but today what I wanted to show you is one that you probably wouldn't think of to use for this. And that is the perfect, what's it called? Perfect 1/4 inch foot with guide for IDT. Now, the reason I would choose this is that I can get, I'm in the wrong mirror, wrong camera. I can get a pretty narrow edge between where my stitching is and the edge of my project, but I can also, because this is the perfect 1/4 inch, it allows you to move the needle over a bit. So I can get even closer to this guide, so I can have an even narrower top stitch. However, the important part is that the guide will keep your stitch straight, because if you have this guide going against the edge of your vinyl, it's going to keep it nice and straight. So what I would do is I take this foot off, and I'm going to actually move my needle over, I think to 0.8. I'm moving it to the right. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to use my flywheel to make sure it's not going to hit the edge of the hole in the foot, and that looks like it clears really well. So then I'm going to change to a not variegated thread, because I don't like the idea of variegated around the edge. And to more of a thread that will fold into the background more, a maroon thread to match the vinyl. So let me get that threaded up here. And you get to see the magic needle threader again. Okay, so then what I would do is I'm going to change my stitch length to 3.5. I think that looks better for top stitching. Put my foot down. And I want to run this, this guide all the way along my vinyl here. And that way my seam will be really straight. Because otherwise it just tends to, without it, I find that if I don't have that guide there, my seam is just not as straight. Another thing that could be helpful is to turn on projection. So let's see if I can get my camera working again so you can see projection over here. So projection is, this is the icon for projection. Now projection in the icon 2 is very customizable, and there's all sorts of things that you can do with it. The first thing you do is you turn it on, and you want to turn your LED work lights, the lights that light up your work area, down so that you can see the projection really well. And I can project a grid. I'm going to turn the camera back to the needle so you can see. I could have a grid. I can have a stitch guide. I can have stitch preview. Let's change the stitch and you'll see what the stitch preview looks like. So I could actually see my stitch right on my fabric. There's all sorts of things you could do. But in this instance, what I would do is I would, with projection, I would just put my stitch guide on. I'm going to turn my grid off. I'm going to turn my stitch preview off. And now with my stitch guide, this red line, what I would do is I'm going to go in and move it to the right. And you'll see what I'm doing in a second. I want to put that also on the edge of my vinyl. And that will also help me to keep on the straight here, because that should skirt right along the edge of my vinyl there. I love that projection. It's one of my favorite new features. So many things you can use it with because it's so customizable. So between watching the stitch guide here and that guide on the foot, I mean, it really keeps things where you want it to be. So bring the needle down or rotate this and show you. You get a very nice top stitch edge, and that really gives it a much better appearance. That's what finishes off the project. Okay, so we have 2 minutes. Any questions on anything that I did? Any questions about the circular attachment, about any of the feet that I did, about our new serger, about the icon 2? You've got 1 minute, and you have my full attention. Okay, I guess perhaps we are done. So Meredith, do you know when Karen Charles' Facebook Live is on rope bowls so that I can tell everyone? Or did you already put that in the comments and I haven't seen it, rolled past me? I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, she says just a second, she'll let you know. Karen Charles is amazingly creative, and like I said, that rope bowl class is going to be a lot of fun. And you can see you can make things super quick with the rope, and it's not expensive. And you can do all sorts of fun things with it. So I have so many ideas of things that I want to do when I have some time to actually sew. So definitely look at that. I mean, we have our Facebook Lives on a regular basis on Thursdays. I think they're twice a month, might be once a month. And once they are broadcasted, they are recorded. They're still available on Facebook. And then we also put them on YouTube. I think that it's probably a little easier to find it on YouTube. That's where I would look personally, because you just go to the PFAFF page and you can search through all of the videos. So let's see. She says it's not up on Facebook events yet, but it will be soon. And we do Facebook Lives twice a month on the first and third Thursday. So be on the lookout for Karen's class. There'll be tons of other great classes. I am doing, I'm not sure what I'm doing next, but I will be doing another one next month. And until then, happy sewing, everyone. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me. And I hope to see you at the next Facebook Live. Oh, my computer does not want to end the broadcast.